simply because he watched his country's national team lose the World Cup final. This 9-year-old boy made a promise to his tearful father.
I'll win a World Cup for Brazil, Pai. I promise.
Hearing this, the father thought the child was just trying to comfort him, so he told him to listen to his mother and study hard. But he had no idea that this very promise would lead Brazil to lift the Jules Rimet trophy 3 times, because this child was none other than Pele, the king of football. However, many people don't know that Pele was not his real name, but a mocking nickname used by wealthy kids to ridicule him. Pele was born in a remote village in Brazil. His family's poverty meant he had to shoulder life's burdens early. Every day after school, he shined shoes on the street to help make ends meet. The only thing that brought him joy was soccer. Unable to afford a ball, they would stuff old socks into a cloth to kick around. Without a pitch, the dusty streets were his San Siro. The children, barefoot, darted through the alleys, showcasing the ginga that flowed in Brazilian blood. With their agile dribbling and precise passing, Pele showed exceptional talent by the age of 9, but his passion was strongly opposed by his mother, because his father had also been a professional player. A serious knee injury during a match left him disabled. Now, with a limp, he worked as a janitor. She didn't want her son to repeat the same fate, but some dreams, once rooted in the heart, grow like wild grass. One day, Pele went with his mother to work as a maid at a wealthy family's home. In the spacious living room were delicate pastries he had never seen before. When his mother wasn't looking, he sneaked one, but after just one bite, some wealthy kids with muddy feet walked in. When he heard them talking about soccer stars, Pele couldn't help but chime in, saying his favorite player was Pele.
Who the heck's Pele?
Goalkeeper for Vasco.
Pele, imbecile. His name's Pele.
They surrounded him, laughing mockingly, even kicking a ball toward him. His mother rushed over and humbly apologized, sternly scolding Pele, who tried to explain, and promised never to bring him again. Pele felt both wronged and angry. Before leaving, he secretly took half a newspaper from the cabinet. It contained information about the Bauru Youth Cup. Pele immediately gathered his friends to form a team, but their opponents turned out to be those same arrogant, privileged rich kids. The other team wore brand new professional jerseys. Pele and his teammates wore uniforms sewn by their mothers from bedsheets because they couldn't afford shoes. They were mercilessly mocked by their opponents as the Barefoot Squad. To salvage their meager dignity, the boys risked stealing peanuts to try to buy some decent shoes. But while they were selling peanuts on the street, they ran into the rich kids again. They not only insulted the teammate who wore glasses, but also mocked Pele with his own nickname. This lit a fire in Pele. He slapped one of them, and they all started fighting. Pele's father witnessed the scene, but didn't immediately intervene. Later, he earnestly told him, a true champion isn't shaken by a few harsh words. If you want to be a professional player, you must learn to accept who you truly are. Violence never solves anything. These few words shone a light into the chaos of Pele's heart. Soon, the day of the final arrived, but the used shoes they bought with their peanut money were as big as boats and didn't fit at all. The loose shoes severely restricted their footwork. They made mistake after mistake. The Barefoot Squad quickly fell behind by 6 goals. The rich kids mocked Pele, saying his skills were terrible. Furious, Pele was about to explode when his eyes met his father's in the crowd. That firm and gentle look was like a sedative, immediately calming him down. He thought for a moment, then took off those size 45 shoes and threw them out of the field without hesitation. The onlookers burst into laughter. In their eyes, it was just the act of a clown, but Pele didn't care. He felt the earth's temperature with his bare feet. He had accepted his true self. He closed his eyes, imagining the noisy field as the familiar streets where he ran freely every day. Only by returning to his roots could he unleash his potential. When he opened his eyes again, it was as if a sleeping beast had awoken. He gently lifted the ball, and it danced nimbly between his toes, knees, and shoulders. Each move was fluid and sharp, drawing gasps from the crowd. Then, he dribbled past the entire defense on his own, and scored easily. Inspired by him, his teammates also threw off their shoes. With their seamless coordination, they fought back to 6-5. Although they ultimately lost by 1 goal due to lack of time, the entire crowd was chanting Pele's name. That originally insulting nickname had, in that moment, become a medal of honor. Meanwhile, a scout from Santos FC noticed Pele's talent and gave his father a business card. But before his dream could take off, disaster struck one after another. Workers from a peanut factory came looking for them. The children fled in panic. To escape, they hid in a small cave, but the cave suddenly collapsed. One of the boys didn't make it out. Pele tried with all his might to save him, but could only watch helplessly as the mud engulfed his friend's life. Pele was devastated. Deep self-blame almost consumed him. If it weren't for soccer, they wouldn't have stolen the peanuts, and his friend wouldn't have died.
It's all my fault, Mom. I killed him. I killed him.
His mother didn't blame him. She just gently held him in her arms. His father tightly clenched the scout's card, but ultimately handed it to his wife, letting it sink into the depths of a drawer. From then on, Pele seemed like a different person. Every day after school, he obediently followed his father, doing hard, dirty work without complaint. But there was no smile on his face. Instead, there was a silence that didn't match his age. To restore the sparkle to his son's eyes, his father started using mangoes as soccer balls, showcasing his skills. He deliberately kicked a mango off target, letting it land outside the trash can to stimulate Pele's competitive spirit. Sure enough, Pele couldn't stand it. When his father wasn't looking, he sent the mango straight into the bin with one precise kick. Father and son smiled at each other. Long-lost joy returned to Pele's face. From then on, his father's homemade mango training became their secret game. Green mangoes for practicing shot power, ripe mangoes for practicing ball control and soft touch. At first, Pele was always anxious. His father taught him not to rush into things, to enjoy the rhythm of the process, and the difficulties would naturally resolve themselves. Father's love was like a mountain, silent but deep, quietly guarding the growth of a genius. Time flew by. 6 years passed in the blink of an eye. Pele had developed remarkably skillful control of the ball. Although he could only show it off in the alleys, he had found found his confidence again, seeing the light rekindle in her son's eyes. His mother finally understood that soccer was woven into his life. One night, she found that dusty card and called the scout. When father and son returned home the next day, the scout had already been waiting for a while with an invitation from Santos FC. It was the dream destination for every Brazilian boy. Looking at his mother's encouraging eyes, Pele hugged her excitedly. And so, carrying his family's hopes, Pele set off on his journey to chase his dream. But there is always a gap between ideals and reality. At his first training session with Santos, Pele's Jenga skills were used by the coach as a negative example. To correct him, the coach showed footage of the 1954 World Cup. In the footage, Brazil's flashy Jenga technique repeatedly failed against the tight defenses of European teams. This was widely seen as the main reason for the loss. Pele understood the coach's point and reluctantly began learning the rigid European style. But this way, which went against his nature, was torture for him. Even when the coach taught him hands-on, he made mistake after mistake. Over time, he became the worst player on the team. In the quiet of the night, Pele often secretly wiped away tears, but he knew he carried his family's hopes on his shoulders. So after every training session, he would practice the European style alone on the field, but he could never find the feel for it. It was like forcing a left-hander to write with their right hand. A scout saw all of this. He firmly believed that Pele was a rough diamond requiring polish. But then, late one night a few days later, Pele finally couldn't bear the pressure anymore. With his suitcase in hand, he was ready to run away. His lonely, small silhouette in the moonlight looked especially pitiful. Early the next morning, however, the scout stopped him at the station and revealed the truth about why Jenga was rejected. It turned out that Jenga originated from capoeira, a martial arts dance used by black slaves to resist their colonizers in the 16th century. After slavery was abolished, this dance was incorporated into soccer. But after Brazil's humiliating loss at the 1950 World Cup, this style was blamed as the main culprit and became a symbol of backwardness. The scout looked into Pele's eyes and said, "Since that skill is already etched into your soul, you should have the courage to prove its value to the world." The words struck a chord. If no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't become what others wanted him to be, then he might as well go all out. With this conviction, Pele returned to the field. The scout's encouraging gaze from the stands felt like his father was right there. The ball at his feet suddenly felt like that familiar mango. He controlled the ball with his chest, let it drop to his foot, used a fake to nutmeg a defender. Every move was as fluid as when he played on the streets. The coach shouted from the sidelines to pass, but Pele couldn't hear him. He spun past a defender with a Marseille turn, stopped and chipped the ball in a crowd of 4 or 5, and then executed a spectacular overhead kick. The whole stadium erupted. The coach waved him over. Pele thought he was about to be scolded, but the coach simply said,
What the hell was that?
I'm sorry.
Do it again.
With that recognition, Pele was like an untamed horse, galloping freely across the pitch. His dazzling Jenga dance took him all the way from the youth team to the professional team, making him the top scorer. Newspapers and TV were full of this 15-year-old prodigy, but he didn't become arrogant. Instead, he secretly practiced the European style he wasn't good at, trying to merge the two. His hard work paid off. A year later, Pele was selected for the Brazilian national team as an alternate, set to go to the 1958 World Cup in Sweden. Before he left, his father gave him a jersey embroidered with the name Pele. This former player, with his broken leg, left his son with a warning: never doubt your own faith, because he himself had started to question the Jenga technique in the middle of the play, and that's when he unfortunately broke his leg.
But you have to be stronger than I was. When people say mean things about you and how you play, you must never fail.
Ashamed, but got it.
His father smiled, said no more, and just gave his son a big hug. And so, Pele set off on his World Cup journey. But when he arrived at the national team training camp, Pele was surprised to see that the rich kid archrival from his childhood was also there. He had even changed his name to the more European-sounding Mazzola. What demoralized Pele even more was that the head coach strictly forbade anyone from using Jenga. Under immense pressure, Pele lost his way again. In the selection matches, he hesitated between the two styles, making constant mistakes. In his mind, his father's advice and the coach's prohibition clashed violently. Just as he tried to forcefully imitate the European style, his knee slammed hard into the ground. In that moment, he saw his father's tragedy about to repeat itself. With less than 6 months until the World Cup, Pele was not fully recovered and faced being cut. He hid in a phone booth to call his mother, crying like a helpless child. His mother, holding back her own pain, comforted him gently. This is not a one-man fight. No matter what happens, home will always be your final refuge. Time quickly brought them to Sweden in 1958. During the group stage of the World Cup, Brazil advanced to the quarterfinals, but had 3 key players injured in a row, including the rich kid Mazzola. As an alternate, Pele was called up in an emergency. He was so nervous he vomited in the locker room. As he came out, he ran into Mazzola. He blamed himself for not being able to learn the European style. Mazzola gave a rueful smile and spoke from his heart. "I injured my leg. You injured your mind. I wanted to be European since I was a child, even changed my name. But I've realized here that blind imitation will never work." These words completely woke Pele up. Only by being truly Brazilian could he awaken the soul of this team. In the semi-final against France, the 17-year-old Pele looked completely out of place against the tall Europeans. The commentator called him a dwarf. Jeers came from the stands. This shattered Pele's composure. Brazil fell into a hard battle. At halftime, the coach was still talking about European tactics that no one understood. Looking Looking at his dejected teammates, Pele decided to break the silence. In the second half, he disobeyed orders and unleashed the Jinga within. The elf from the Brazilian slums had returned. He toyed with the French defenders with magical footwork, dribbled past 3 players, and went one-on-one with the keeper. This goal ignited Brazil's fighting spirit and left the arrogant European spectators in stunned silence. Then Pele scored a hat-trick, leading Brazil proudly into the final. On the eve of the final, the Swedish coach went on a tirade in the media, mocking the Brazilian team as a bunch of deformed misfits, with uneven legs, curved spines, and even color blindness. This psychological warfare struck the Brazilian players hard. At the critical moment, Pele's father called from overseas. He told Pele that the people back home were cheering for him. Don't be blinded by prejudice. Now you need to inspire your teammates. Trust in Brazil. Trust in Jinga. To boost morale, Pele held a special game in the hotel lobby. They had to keep the ball in the air using only their heads and reach a distant lighthouse without letting the ball touch the ground. As the joyful samba rhythm played, the ball seemed to come alive at their feet. The once dejected team came alive in an instant. Seeing this, the head coach finally understood. Joy is the driving force of Brazilian football.
That's how we play. They say that we don't all play the same.
It's true.
We certainly don't all look the same, like they do.
The 1958 World Cup final. Only 4 minutes into the game, Sweden took the lead. The European commentator asserted that Brazil would repeat their 1950 defeat. A sense of despair enveloped the entire team, but Pele remembered his father's lessons, the scouts' encouragement, and his teammates' trust. He understood that the more desperate the situation, the more resolute he had to be. The more people doubted him, the braver he had to be. After the restart, Pele decisively used his trademark rainbow flick, breaking through the defense with agile dribbling. His breathtaking performance brought Brazilian fans to their feet. He combined beautifully with his teammates, first assisting them to equalize, then scoring himself to take the lead. Brazil's Jinga football was fluid and graceful. Every player was immersed in the joy of the game. In the final minute, a long pass found Pele. Under the eyes of the world, Pele watched the ball, planted his feet, exploded upward, and headed the ball into the net. The game was over. Brazil had won the championship. When the final whistle blew, Pele collapsed on the field, tears streaming down his face. He had finally fulfilled the promise he made to his father. More importantly, he had shown the world that Brazilian football didn't need to imitate anyone. After that, Pele led Brazil to 3 World Cup titles. He scored 1,283 goals in his professional career. He is the undisputed king of football, an insurmountable monument in the history of soccer. In 2022, the king passed away at the age of 82, but what he left the world was not just the spectacular goals, it was a spiritual symbol.